the spot. My name is John Cook, president of the Osterville Village Association, and on both my side there are directors. This is the November 1st meeting for the OVA. First up is the secretary's report. All directors got a copy of that report. Are there any additions or changes or anything else you'd like to bring forward?
Move it be accepted.
With a second, all in favor of accepting the October 4th board of directors minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on. Treasurer's report, Al.
And we have three accounts of the organization here. Our first one is our main checking accounts. Actually, it's our smallest balance, $1,357.93. And John is holding me a bill for another $100 or so, so I think about $1,200 right now. We have a money market fund, which is finally starting to pay some interest. And it's $5,109.93, and that's basically like our savings account here. Our third account is our Robert Smith Fund, which is the amount allocated for gifts. And that's $25,110. So all told, about $31,000 between the three accounts.
Any questions for Al? Seeing none, all want to accept the treasurer's report for November 1st, 2022, say aye. All opposed? Okay, move forward. Something P at Yale.
Okay. Our fall festival was held on October 8th and our fall cocktail party was held on October 18th. We're both very successful and well attended. We recognized the retirement of Margaret Innes of Chuckerberry House Incorporated, who was retiring after 53 years in business in the village of Osterville. Our steering committee decided not to hold our November breakfast meeting this year. We are finalizing the plans for Christmas stroll for December 9th and some special events and music during the days of Saturdays, December 3rd and 10th, to promote the Christmas spirit in the village and hopefully help the retail businesses this season. We are planning the usual OVA, OVPA Christmas Charities Appeal. As always, Bruce Williams will be handling this for us. We will present the proceeds to the Salvation Army and the Cape Cod Times Needed Fund on Wednesday, December 7th at Rockland Trust on West Bay Road at 2 p.m. You are all welcome to attend the presentation. Respectfully submitted, Gail Nightingale.
Thanks, Gail. Appreciate it. It's Wednesday, December 7th.
Yes. You'll all be getting a letter from Bruce Williams asking to contribute. Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, next we have our guest speakers. We have Elizabeth Jenkins and Steve Costello from the Long Range Comprehensive Plan Committee. Steve is the chairman. They're here to present their first introduction to the LCPC. So go ahead.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development, Town of Barnstable, and Kate Maldonado, Assistant Planner, and Steve Costello. I am currently the chairman of the Local Comprehensive Plan and a planning board member. And we also have in our audience another planning board member and local comprehensive committee member, Mr. Bob Twist. And what's interesting, the local comprehensive plan, you think of it as kind of a tool that not only Barnstable, but really every major municipality across the country uses. So as I started to look at this, and as a member of the planning board, the local comprehensive plan really starts at the planning board level, and that's kind of where the plan is initiated. With that said, though, with a town as diverse as Barnstable, and you look at all of the different communities and villages, you know, the whole goal is really to do community outreach, find out what it is that we as community members really want to see for the next 10 years. So I'm a volunteer. I love Osterville. I've been living in Barnstable and Osterville specifically for the last 28 years. So I feel like I've known it. And when I started to look at the last local comprehensive plan, it was really kind of interesting. Some of the things that you see, and last time the comprehensive plan was put together, each of the villages essentially put together their own section. So it was kind of cool from a historical perspective to see what happened and what did Osterville think. So even though I was a resident here, I was more in the thick of things with raising kids and working and things of that nature. So as I started to peel back the onion and look at the historical plan that was really specific to Osterville, because that's what's important to me, and I know certainly everyone that's in this room, there are some common themes that were part of the local comprehensive plan, and something that jumped out at me that really sort of is a thing to think about for us in terms of what we want in our village. How do we want to maintain the integrity of our village? How do we want to maintain zoning? As I started to look through the comprehensive plan and started to connect the dots back to kind of what's taken place with zoning in Barnstable. This plan was done in 2005. And what was interesting to me is that kind of coincidence with sort of that plan and when it started, every other village, Marston Mills, West Barnstable, Centerville, every other village has their own specific zoning specific to their village. So what's kind of interesting to me, not having been involved, Osterville is the only village that doesn't have specific zoning language included in the zoning code of the town of Barnstable. So with that being said, it's more looked at sort of as the larger part of Barnstable. So I think it's important to start to think about one of the criteria might be as we look forward, how do we get an Osterville centric zoning sort of included into not only our zoning code, but as part of our local comprehensive plan. So one thing that, when you start to look at historically what made sense back then, things changed, demographics changed. There was the Darby property that was on the agenda as something that needed to be maintained for open space. And ultimately that was developed into sort of a small subdivision. We talk about community character in the Bay School. And we all know sort of with demographics and the way that things have changed with, our kids and students not really living in the village so much anymore. That use was no longer appropriate in terms of the building itself. We know it had some significant problems. So the point being, as we start to think about what's important to us in the village, it's a 10-year plan. So we want to think about, where do we want to be? What are the things that we want to do and put in place to talk about to make sure that the plan is meaningful for all of us and kind of ticks all the boxes and make sure that it gets included into the overall local comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is really more of a roadmap. It's kind of a document that our town councilors who we elect work for us. So they're going to initiate a plan and hopefully use it kind of within the boundaries of what we as residents and citizens think of as our priorities and things that we want to see maintained. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth. She's going to go through kind of where we are in the process, and it's going to be hopefully completely conversational. So as far as any questions that may pop up or just questions about the process and the plans and how do we all make an impact, Elizabeth's going to help us with. We're doing outreach right now. We're creating ways for anyone who lives in the town of Barnstable and any of the villages to be able to reach out and put their 2 cents in. So not to say that, the OBA couldn't have kind of a collective statement, but with that said, there are certainly a number of other residents that may not be able to be present here on a regular basis that will still have an opportunity to kind of weigh in and put their 2 cents into the LCP. Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Steve. A pleasure to be here tonight. Again, I'm Elizabeth Jenkins, the planning director for the town of Barnstable. I've been with the town for about 12 years, started out as a staff planner and am now director. We're going to talk about tonight, give you an overview of the local comprehensive plan, the process, what is it, what we're trying to achieve, and then as Steve said, really just try to have a facilitated discussion and listen. We're going to go through a basic exercise. What do you think the strengths of your village are, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, really to get us to the first deliverable in this process, which is a vision statement or statements, which is just a broad consensus-based collection of shared thoughts and values. How do we want to grow as a community? What do we want to preserve as a community? So I'm actually going to turn it over to Kate to start that presentation. And like I said, we're going to talk about strengths. So I just want to recognize Kate as our assistant director, certainly a huge asset to the town of Barnstable. Introduce you all to Kyle Pedicini as well. Certainly he has a lot of experience in Osterville. He's our new economic development planner. So great to have this team on board and helping us. Kate, do you want to?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Not step on any cords. So Kate Maldonado, Assistant Director of Planning and Development. So we're going to go through a quick presentation to just talk about what the local comprehensive plan is before we dive into a larger discussion. So local comprehensive plan is a long-term vision, and that vision will be established with targeted goals. Here on Cape Cod, local comprehensive plans are defined per the regulations and guidance established by the Cape Cod Commission. Some of the objectives of a local comprehensive plan is to express values, concerns, and desires of our community. A local comprehensive plan should also reflect preferences and expectations established again by a community. The local comprehensive plan should also serve as a framework and rationale for management of future growth. And it also serves as a wealth of data, both existing as well as proposed future data, expected conditions within the town. The local comprehensive plan is important because it puts our town's mission into action. A local comprehensive plan, it defines our quality of life, engages our citizens, and it establishes a policy to anticipate our future. Steve Costello, chair of our local comprehensive planning committee, touched on the role, but the role of the committee is to steer this development, both the engagement of the plan and the overall process. Here on Cape Cod, as mentioned, local comprehensive plans are coordinated with regulations and guidelines established by the Cape Cod Commission, and that's so that at a larger level, land use planning strategies are consistent both at a regional and a local level. For the Cape Cod Commission, the regional policy plan, often referred to as the RPP, is the overarching framework for planning and land use across Cape Cod. I'll hand it over to Elizabeth, and we'll talk a little bit about what the content of the local comprehensive plan will be.
Thanks, Kate. So one of the other things that the RPP does is it defines what are the contents or what's required to go into a local comprehensive plan. What are those chapters? So as I mentioned, the first thing that goes into a local comprehensive plan is a vision statement. And again, this is exactly what it sounds. It's a statement that expresses the shared values of our community, especially as it relates to future growth, development, and resource protection. So this could be protection of environmental resources, cultural and natural resources. We'll get a little bit into those different issue areas here in a moment. As Kate mentioned, it's also a wealth of data about our community, where we stand today. And when we say existing conditions, not just from a data perspective, but also from how the residents view their quality of life. So in addition to the data that we collect, census and demographics and all of those things, we add to that the voice of our residents. So again, an overview and inventory of assets, general discussion about growth and resource protection. Using this information, a local comprehensive plan sets broad goals, again, for the vision of our community, generally related to planning and land use. And these goals help us answer the question, how will key challenges identified by the residents of our town be addressed in the future? Another required chapter of a local comprehensive plan is a capital facilities plan. So when we think about land use and growth, we think about infrastructure to serve that as well. Certainly, whether it's transportation infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, all of those things are so closely tied to land use. So a component of a local comprehensive plan is a plan for providing infrastructure. And the town of Barnstable is actually way ahead on this one. We have a very robust capital improvement process, a 5-year CIP that we go through every year. So this is a document that and a process that's already in place, but that we hope the results of this local comprehensive plan can help inform in the future in terms of priorities. Housing production plan, another required element of a local comprehensive plan. So a housing production plan is actually a plan and a process that's prescribed by the state of Massachusetts, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and it itself is a roadmap for how a community addresses its housing needs, specifically its affordable housing needs. So it's a very tailored process, but obviously fits within the overall conversation about land use and planning townwide. The town of Barnstable is actually due for an update to its housing production plan right now as well. We update this document every 5 years. Based on the requirements of the state. So we last did this in 2016. The HPP is due to be updated next year. So hopefully, if you guys have been in touch with communications from the town of Barnstable or the local comprehensive plan newsletter, you can see that we've gone through a very similar process related to HPP, data, existing conditions, general thoughts about housing challenges, and now we are moving on to this goal setting process, goals and strategies. What do we want to achieve relative to housing and affordable housing? We'll send you guys away with some information, but the next step in this process is a forum, a housing forum, to really talk about goals and housing strategies. That'll be held November 30th at Town Hall. So that process is progressing parallel to this one and certainly informs this process as well. So once we get down the road, once we talk about vision, once we talk about goals, then that's when we start to develop an action plan. So once we kind of know collectively where we want to go as a community, where you all want to go as a village, that's where we start to identify actions. And these actions, there are a number of things that could be identified as an action in a local comprehensive plan. They might be a regulatory change. Steve talked about zoning. That might be something down the road that is identified as an action to help us achieve an outcome regarding a conversation we want to have. It might be a capital project. It might be again, priorities about how the town allocates resources. So in the end, we don't just want this to be a process where we listen to people and the plan goes on the shelf. An action plan helps inform our policymakers, our boards, committees, and commissions about how to put the priorities that they hear from our community into action. LCP issue areas, do you want to take this? Sure. All right, Kate.
So while Elizabeth talked about the specific chapters in the local comprehensive plan, if you take a step back, the local comprehensive plan will talk about the interconnection between 3 broad systems. Those systems are our natural systems, our built systems, as well as our community systems. Coupled with the targeted action plan that Elizabeth spoke of, there will also be performance measures. So each goal will have a performance measure, and the ability of the performance measure is to be able to track the progress of each of our goals. So we can see how we're achieving our goals and when and if it's necessary to tackle some of the goals with additional resources to ensure that they're achieved. The last step, the local comprehensive plan adoption. So the final draft will be submitted to our town council, as Steve has mentioned, for a vote. And then that draft would be submitted to the Cape Cod Commission for certification.
And so that's our overview. And this is the point where we really turn it over to you. And we just really want to have a facilitated discussion tonight and go through, again, 4 categories: the strengths of the town of Barnstable. And when I think about these strengths, I ask myself questions: what's my favorite thing about living here? What would I never want to change about the village of Osterville? And these are things that once we have this information, it gives us an idea about what we want to preserve, what we want to build on. Because certainly when you're in a community and thinking about its future, where you want to start is the best parts of it. I guess I turn it over to John in terms of how you want to facilitate, but I'd love to open it up to the audience and really start to hear from you. What we're going to do is Kate is just going to pull up on the screen some note taking so you guys can hear, so you guys can see what we're responding. Kate's obviously going to do this on the fly. So if what she writes down, you don't feel like captures, you don't feel like captures what you said, just please speak up and we can change.
Also, if sometimes people don't like speaking up, we have come up with, this is the first version of this, but there's going to be a QR code here. And this little flyer is going to go out in the mail. It's going to be very prevalent and handed out pretty much anywhere we can. We're going to leave some here tonight. And what this will do, it's going to lead you to a survey. It's going to ask you what village you live in, a series of questions to help, us understand the priorities. So rather than just, some notes here that come out of the audience, we're going to incorporate those notes as well as any of the feedback that we get from folks, town of Barnstable wide. That way, we're making sure we reach everybody, and then we'll be able to drill down to specific things in Osterville specifically that we want to make sure become part of the LCP ultimately.
Yeah, there's a bunch right there at the end of the table here.
Great. Yeah, there's some as you walk in, and thank you so much, Steve. I got a little bit too excited to dive into our exercise, but I should have mentioned other ways to get involved. Obviously, we are going out to all 7 of our village civic associations, having these meetings, but oftentimes we've done this in a couple village civic associations. Folks, hear something and then have an idea, want to come back to it later or add another comment. We have an entire engagement plan that was put together with the cooperation of the local comprehensive planning committee, with the idea that every resident, every stakeholder in the town of Barnstable, whether you're a year-round resident, a seasonal resident, a business owner, somebody who works here, has the ability to influence this plan and have a voice in this plan. And it really is our goal to reach as many people in our community as possible. Obviously, this is a great way working within our existing organizations to get people together, but some people might not have the time the ability or miss this meeting. So there are a number of other ways to leave comment. This is sort of our hub for all things local comprehensive plan. It's a webpage. You can find it on the town of Barnstable webpage, barnstablelcp.com. It's a great overview of the project, more specifics into all of those different issue areas that we just talked about. You can leave public comment directly on the homepage there. So if there's something that you think of, even as we're in the meeting and want to add it in there, you can do it. You can sign up for a local comprehensive plan newsletter. We send these out generally monthly at this point, informing people of upcoming events. We have an engagement calendar on here that outlines all the different ways we are out in the community. We were on Main Street last night, handing out survey flyers to folks. And if you're part, and I will say, if you are part of an organization or a book club or a church group, and you're really interested in the local comprehensive plan, part of this process is not just us trying to come to you and listen to you, but also really identify people who want to be more engaged in their community. Please reach out to us. We would love to be able to make space and come to you and hear from you one-on-one in a setting to talk about the local comprehensive plan. So did I miss any major outreach? So we have the survey. We'll leave these cards with you. We literally just launched this last night. So it'll be up on our website, hopefully tomorrow, for everybody to see, but you guys are the first ones, some of the first ones to get this card. And comments here. Certainly we have some comment up walls for, again, folks, and these will go up in our libraries, in our senior center, other places around town. So if you see one, please encourage you and your friends and your kids to put a sticky note on there and leave your thoughts, because again, it's this big collection of information that we hope can inform this plan.
So you want to open up the questions, I think. Let me ask you one question about the survey. Can you tell us a little bit of the technicals of the survey? Is it going to be updated daily? How are we going to identify where people are from, that they actually live in the town and that kind of stuff? Is it going to separate villages, or is it going to? Can you give us more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll say is, this is what this is not, is a process to conduct a statistically significant outreach within the town of Barnstable. If you guys are familiar with survey research methods, you can hire companies to do statistically significant sampling. This is open to the public. So certainly we ask people, I think one of the first questions on here is, what's your affiliation with the town of Barnstable? What village do you live in? Are you year round or seasonal? So we are asking people to identify that information from us. It is, again, the first phase of our survey. So, again, trying to look at the big picture in the town of Barnstable. But one of the things that we'll do is, we collect this data and we'll take a look at it. If we see any issues, we'll obviously bring those up as we go through the process. But it's open to everybody.
Any questions? Right there, sir. Right there.
It sounds like a very ambitious plan, obviously. But one of the things I didn't hear in your overview is what are your target dates for various of these stages? For example, is CCC the last thing? So like, when does that all have to be completed?
Yeah, so CCC is the last thing. I will say, so we're kind of approaching this in two phases. One of the things, and certainly we're learning this with outreach, is especially as we craft a public participation plan, it has to be adaptive. We have to be able to adapt, and it has to be iterative. Like if we go through this and we see at the end, hey, we haven't really reached this portion of our population. We can tell based on the events that we did, based on our survey responses, that we need to get this voice into this conversation. Then we'll go back and do that work. And we're absolutely committed to doing this. If we hear from people, we're not hearing enough from this village, we're not hearing enough from parents or something like that. So I guess it's sort of a way of saying, our milestones are general, not sort of set in stone. But the first phase of this process, the visioning, we just launched the survey. We expect to keep it open through December, and we would like to do sort of what we're calling a pulling it all together event for this first phase. So really taking the results of all the outreach that we hear in about mid-January. So wrapping up the first phase of this visioning process mid-January, and then really diving more into the goals and the technical aspects of the plan. And we probably expect that additional phase to take another year.
Who does the commission submit the report to?
The commission itself, and this is that's a test. The commission itself is the one, the Cape Cod Commission is the one who ultimately certifies the plan as consistent. I do not believe it gets submitted to the assembly. So the last stop is so local comprehensive planning committee makes a recommendation to the town council. They approve the plan, and then the plan gets submitted to the Cape Cod Commission for a consistency certification. And I guess let me explain that a little. What that means is, again, they find that overall our plan is reflective of the goals in the regional policy plan. It doesn't mean that what we're doing is adopting any of the RPP goals as our town goals. I mean, overall, the voice of the residents of the town of Barnstable is the one that gets reflected in here. But generally, in terms of the categories, the land use strategies, they're looking for consistency on certain categories. So it doesn't mean that in any way we're, adopting the RPP as our plan.
I'm rather surprised that Cape Cod Commission has final say, because nobody on the commission is elected by the residents. And Cape Cod Council is. I don't see why the buck doesn't stop with the Cape Cod Council. I'm quite familiar with the cross-section of Cape Cod Commission. It seems to be very heavily slanted towards equity, quality, and therefore I'm comfortable thinking that they have the final say.
Yeah, so let me clarify. They're not the ones that are approving the content of our plan. Ultimately, the contents of our plan is approved by our town council. They review the plan for consistency with the regional policy plan. So, there could certainly be things in there that they identify as inconsistent, but overall, the plan itself is approved by the elected leadership of the town of Barnstable, which is the town council. The next step, again, is to seek that consistency determination from the Cape Cod Commission.
Because we know that our town is made up of 7 villages. And each village, I think, it's fair to say, has a distinct personality, its own character. So how does your department try to reconcile the differences in our 7 villages? And I hope it's not to homogenize it, but to maintain some character for each village.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the strengths of the town of Barnstable, I think about our villages and their individual identity and those individual communities as one of our main strengths here in the town of Barnstable. And I'm sure that's some of what we're going to hear tonight. So, you know, having sort of approaching this on a townwide framework isn't about homogenization. I think it's about consistency. You know, when we do our capital improvement plan, we're thinking, you know, we don't do one of those for each village. We do our townwide budget, you know, we don't do a budget for each village. We think consistently across the town of Barnstable, but it doesn't mean we're not thinking about the individual needs of villages or the preferences of those residents. So we hope all of those 7 identities come out within this plan, but it also represents sort of an overarching and an interconnected framework for the entire town.
Just Rick, on that, in terms of the last comprehensive plan that was done, I think one of the outcomes or outputs was individual village zoning that's now included in the zoning regulations. So for whatever reason, between when the plan was communicated and discussed, Osterville, for whatever reason, never ultimately had specific zoning language. So if you look at the code of the town of Barnstable online, it's available for everybody. You can see each village and what they specifically include in terms of what their goals are or what is sort of allowed. When you look at each village, it's distinctly unique in terms of a lot more bed and breakfast in Centerville. I'm not aware of any in Osterville. So things of that nature, my opinion, that would be, you know, a very important thing to want to include as part of the LCP as it relates specifically to Osterville.
Osterville does have the BA district, which is different from every other village in town. We have the BA district in our business district.
That's true. Yeah, there is the BA district. I think what Steve is referring to is that one of the major sort of actions that came out of our last local comprehensive plan was the former version of the planning department works collaboratively with other village civic associations to craft zoning that was unique to those village civic associations. So the BA is sort of, you know, it's sort of a generic zoning that's actually reflective. You know, it sort of shares a lot of the same. Well, it does. It mirrors what is the zoning that's in place actually for the regional commercial center in Hyannis. So the process that happened after the last LCP was there, you know, it was that the planning department that preceded this one worked with the different villages civic associations and crafted. So we have in our zoning ordinance a Marston's Mills Village district. You know, we have a West Barnstable Village district. I think what Steve is saying is one of the things we don't have is, you know, there's a BA district, which is specific to Osterville, but there's not an Osterville Village district. And again, that's sort of down the road. Those are those action items. But you know, if that's a product that comes out of this or identified as a need, that's something that we sort of get to down the road. So I want to open it up to you guys and really start this conversation off thinking about again, the strengths of the village of Osterville. What do you guys love about Osterville? Why did you choose to live here? What keeps you here? And again, what are some things that looking forward into the future 10 years would you like to see continue? Yeah.
I think having a well-structured questionnaire with a small number of questions to be circulated to all the residents of the town would help you get a better body of information quicker than trying to come to a meeting like this where we arrive sort of unprepared, not knowing what you expect of us. I mean, I could talk about how wonderful the business district is, the access to the beaches, the access to the marinas, the beautiful residential areas of the town. but that's after about 30 seconds of thought. And I would encourage you to try to stimulate some more comprehensive thinking. I mean, we don't have the Cape Cod Times now to help us very much with this kind of communication. I think communication is incredibly important. And I also think resilience is a very important question for all of us to be raising. Looking at what happened to the west coast of Florida and looking how close we are to the water, how do we think about the resilience of all those qualities that we want to preserve and build?
That's fantastic. So we do, so as I said, this is about multiple ways for people to engage. So we have the questionnaire. What we found with other village civic associations is, sometimes folks like to hear what their neighbors have to say. So, this is just, I guess, one opportunity to engage. I know it's sort of on the spot, but it's also sort of, we hope, there are those sort of intrinsic things that you love about a place that hopefully you don't have to give too much thought to. And you just rambled off a bunch of those. So that was a great way to get us started and to hopefully get some other ideas on the table. Strengths of the village of Osterville, things you love.
Excuse me, there also can be like a section on the weaknesses of Barnstable.
We are going to do strength. So, and that's probably good. We should probably keep an eye on time just so we know how much time we have for each of these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and then threats. But we like to frame that as challenges. So those will be our 4 points, traditionally called a SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, challenges. And I'll keep an eye on time to make sure we give equal time to each.
Go ahead, ma'am.
So will the survey be mailed to every resident of Osterville? So that we can sit at home over a cup of coffee and think about it? And we're new to the town relatively, right, compared to some people, but I like the idea of not doing it here or picking up something. If it comes in the mail, I open it, I read it, and decide if I need to do some action on it.
Yep. So it's funny that you mentioned that. Actually, at our last local comprehensive planning committee meeting, they agreed that, again, a great way to reach people is through direct mail. So we are working on the logistics of essentially mailing one of these postcards to every resident in the town of Barnstable.
It'll be electronic. It's not gonna be, you're not gonna be checking boxes. You're going online with the QR code or directed to the website to complete the survey that way. Just from a data gathering standpoint, it's just the most practical way to do it.
I will tell you this, if you're familiar with the town of Barnstable's website, I'm on it a lot, what I do, and I'm on a lot of different towns' websites. It's, for me at least, I think it's the best one going. I mean, certainly if you're gonna go to property lookup, you want to look into what your real estate is worth, who bought it, your boundary lines, structures, your neighbors. Great way to spy on your neighbors to see what happens. It's exactly, I know what you spent for but it's actually of all the, but it also, if you get to learn to use it, you can pull in the zoning and you can pull in various, water protection districts, and it takes a little time. It's not, but I'm not I'm over 50, so I'm not a computer genius by any stretch of the imagination, and it's not that difficult, and it's a fantastic website. So if I'm sure that this is an attachment right on the planning part of it, but if you go in and you use it and you get familiar with it, it's actually maybe I have no life, but it's actually and you get on there, but it's if you want to see your boundary lines and they have this other feature. If you get on there, you get a literally show you photographs, aerial photographs of your home back from the 90s all the way up until now in different various summertime and April. They're taking conservation so they can see what you're doing. But it's really helpful. So if you get in the mail, don't worry about it. So just jump on the Barnstable website. Fantastic.
One other thing, just to follow up to the comments you made, which are very on point, as part of the process, every department head is engaged with us. So we had, the head of DPW last week at our last meeting. So every single person in charge of, coastal waters and flooding and issues like that, all have to contribute and participate in the overall plan. So it's all included.
Good point.
We should capture what you said, access to beaches, access.
Yeah. And the town website, we're gonna put that one up
We're gonna
there.
have to watch the video after. Okay.
Diane?
Just a question
Yeah,
about that because it's electronic. Will it be available for people that really can't do electronic? We have a lot of people that are older in our community, and that becomes a real issue for them when they get something in the mail. It tells them to go online.
Sure.
Many of them don't have the ability to do
Right,
that.
the little black and white code, what does that mean? That's good feedback. I mean, I'll be honest, we haven't really talked through that, but I know we have great partners in our village libraries. And we've been able to leave surveys there. I actually collected some from Cindy a couple of days ago on another project. So I think that's a great suggestion. We could look at leaving some printed paper copies of the survey at places like village libraries.
And it would be great if the
letting
card
folks know.
actually would say that on it, if you're doing another print of cards. So that when people receive it, they know that, and they can maybe try to get to a library or something and pick up a copy or the post office or wherever.
Yeah, that's great. Great, thank you.
Let me ask you something also.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about the hospital not having a village-centric zoning like the other villages do. Who is going to develop that? And what guarantee do we have that our village has a significant say in any developments towards that?
So I guess what I'll say now to that is that, that's not an action plan that we have as part of our local comprehensive plan. It was spoken to in the 2010 LCP about sort of some of the strengths and weaknesses of the current BA zoning that is in place. And, I think the BA zoning has worked very well for Osterville over time. So generally, at least I can at least reflect on the way those conversations evolved in the other villages in the town of Barnstable, where we did those zoning updates. They were generally done in conversation with village civic associations, and that's where they started. Either them coming to us or us saying, hey, as a recommended item in the 2010 LCP, it was to look at village zoning. And then the conversations evolved from there through village civic association meetings, through public meetings, and then of course through the formal process that zoning goes through for adoption, which is public hearings at planning board and town council. So there's lots of input for zoning changes, but I would say, and you'll hear me say this a lot, I'm a firm believer that planning comes before zoning. So, we are doing the town-wide planning process, and if I think the village identifies that one of the things that they need to do to get to the goals, the strengths that they want to see preserved is to update or change your zoning, that would be a recommended action in the local comprehensive plan. And then we proceed with conversations.
This is really not part of this process, then.
No, it's more of an outcome of the
But that's
discussion.
something that's planned. See?
Yeah, so this is not, this being included in the plan as we want to create an Osterville centric zoning. It wouldn't be part of it, as she said. However, the point being, it's an appropriate time to now include that as part of the discussion that you identify it as something we want to include, and then it's going to take place outside. But I'd encourage you to go onto the zoning page for the town of Barnstable, look at the village specific information, because really what it does, it kind of codifies what we already know: building density, lot coverage, building height, all of those things that are inherent to our zoning. And then in addition to that, it would include those things that either are or would like to be sort of specific and unique to Osterville to maintain kind of the integrity of it. But when you look at, again, I use Centerville because it's easy, bed and breakfast and ice cream shops and, things of that nature that they exclusively identify. So I think it would be more of a broader scope saying, okay, about our village, what are the things that we want to make sure stay the way they are because we like them and we don't want things to change for the worse. We want things to, improve.
But maybe what he's saying is like, how did the Centerville thing get there?
It happened after it happened as part of that conversation after the fact. It wasn't in the LCP necessarily. I just brought it up because as I looked at it, it struck me as saying, you know, these conversations took place and something happened within those other villages. So I thought it's important to make sure that we all know that we ought to have that included. From a personal
drove that percentage.
So let me give an example. So, and honestly, I don't know exactly how it worked, but one of the things in Barnstable Village that was really important to them was to try to encourage more small business, retail. You know, they had a lot of lawyers' offices and real estate offices, but they wanted to see more small shops, but they didn't want to see, they didn't want to see corporate businesses kind of come in. So, and again, I imagine they had a very strong village civic association, much like this one at the time, who worked together with the planning department, and they ended up adopting regulations for the village that prohibits corporate branding. How many times am I going to drop this? Corporate branding or formula businesses. And those were amendments that they made to their village center zoning to say, hey, we want to encourage small business, but we want to limit the types of businesses that are coming into Barnstable. So that's an example of a village center zoning change that happened out of the last local comprehensive plan. And that was done really in cooperation between that village association and the town of Barnstable.
I think a lot of us were there working on that LCP back in the day. I don't remember us talking about changing the zoning in any respect whatsoever, and we weren't approached by the town to do that at the time. So I don't know how it worked. Some of us were here. So if that wasn't something we discussed, we were fairly.
Yeah, I mean, I remember working actually a long time ago. I remember working collaboratively with the Osterville Business and Professional Association in like 2013, and we updated their sign ordinance. So that's another good example. So that conversation probably started through the OBPA, who came to us and said, hey, our businesses are saying that we want more flexible sign regulations. And I remember going through a comprehensive process where we sat down with a small group of, people in different business sectors and came to meetings, a couple of meetings like this, and finally brought forward a revised sign code, revised zoning for signs for the village of Osterville. So it's not that we didn't do any zoning, but that was a specific issue that we heard from the village coming out of that.
Zoning actually, yeah. But
well, it was zoning.
One last question. Can you define community activity center, how it affects Osterville?
So no, I think that term community activity center is a term that comes out of the Cape Cod Commission Act. So that is part of that regional planning framework, not necessarily our local planning framework. We participated, the town of Barnstable participated in that process with the Cape Cod Commission and how they looked at community activity centers. My recollection was that it was a data-driven process, and knowing the commission, they're an organization that makes a lot of decisions based on data. I think it looked at collections of existing businesses, community organizations, things like libraries, and then mapped areas of Cape Cod as community activity centers. But that is the commission's planning framework, and you would want to look to the RPP.
Well, one of the goals of your LCP that I saw up here was community activity centers. And what I understand is that it makes Osterville, Barnstable Village, I think was the other considered activity center, and Hyannis, sort of the same by way of what zoning and the regional plan encourages. So does that tie us into zoning together with those other villages, including Hyannis?
No. So again, planning and zoning, are different exercises. I don't think so. I think when they're saying, these are community activity centers, they're doing what we're sort of here doing tonight. They're looking for areas of Cape Cod that have certain characteristics, certain strengths, and saying, hey, these are places when we think about how we should change in the future. You know, these community activity centers are what we want to build on. It doesn't mean in any way that Hyannis looks like Osterville looks like Barnstable Village. I mean, that's why, again, you do planning before zoning. You know, that's why we're here asking you these questions. What are the, you know, what are the strengths of Osterville? What are the things that you want to make sure we can preserve? So when we talk about zoning down the road, when we talk about outcomes, then we have the information that says, hey, these are the things that we love about Osterville and that we want to build on. You know, that's conversation here is going to look very different than it looks in Hyannis. You know, when we talk about Hyannis, we talk about challenges like, you know, how do we redevelop underutilized and blighted properties? My guess is that's not some of the challenges or threats that we're gonna hear from the village of Osterville. It's very central to, you know, the conversation in Hyannis is thinking about, you know, how do you infill, how do you get more residents downtown, and that's a, you know, that's a different conversation that we've had with that village. And that's sort of where that zoning comes from. We haven't had any of those conversations here. We literally have a blank page when we talk about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in Osterville. So a long way to go on the planning side, really, before we get down the road and talk about what appropriate zoning might look like. If we did go down there, you know, obviously it would be based on what we hear tonight, not anything that we've done at Hyannis.
So is it, to get me right, I mean, this is aspirational, where if you go through zoning, you have your town council to sponsor it, then you have to go through planning, there's public comment, there's advertising, going out, and then if it gets through planning, it's usually adjusted 2 or 3 meetings, and then it has to go to the town council, and I think zoning's a 9 out of 13 vote, right?
It's yes, it's definitely a 9 out of 13 vote.
Majority. So this is aspirational, whereas zoning is a very concrete set of rules that has its own, you know, completely different path. I'm just sitting in the audience, and I think some people are kind of confused. I'm sorry to jump in.
No, please, you've been through the process.
Yeah, and you know, when you do, you know, for instance, I've been involved in changing some zoning, and there are a very distinct set of rules to follow. So it's a whole different path. I mean, this is a kind of an aspirational, where do we want to go, where do we want to be, kind of feel good type of situation. But the 2005 comprehensive plan, a lot of those feel good thoughts evolved into things, but it took whole, you know, complete other processes and other community involvement. You know, I don't know if that simplifies it. Because they're 2 separate things, completely applicable.
Right. So again, this is a planning process, vision, literally vision, big picture. Zoning, a completely different process, statutory. And yeah, I mean, where does zoning come from in Barnstable can be a little bit of a complicated question, and not every zoning amendment is the same. Certainly a lot of them start with, you know, constituents going to a counselor, and then a counselor, you know, saying, hey, we think this is a priority. But you know, every situation and every village is a little bit different.
Any further questions?
One thing I might suggest is, it's here, I don't know, almost a decade ago. And the OVA spent a great deal of time, and I'm sure they looked at it and defining what we wanted and what we loved about the village. You might say that's being old fashioned, but what we loved 10 years ago, it's a damn good place to start.
Yeah.
And that, because I guarantee you, there's one thing in there, because I was here and I saw how hard everybody worked on it. And it's what I love about Osterville, and it's what they love about Osterville. And since we spent 6 months to 8 months doing that, Ron, I think we should dig that out. And we should share it with the people here and show what that work is, what has been done. Because nothing is much changed for the better, but unfortunately, not much has changed. Okay, and that's what we love about Osterville. And that's what people that lived in Long Island 30 years ago would love to have on Long Island. And when I came here 27 years ago, the whole statement was, let us not become Long Island. We do not want the Cape Cod Commission to change us to Long Island. And we're looking heavily at our representatives. And I don't know, simplicity and the beauty and the uniqueness. When anyone comes to Osterville Village, they love it. Therefore, you want to love it like 20 years from now, where there's lived improvement, but not really significant changes.
So I love that. You love what you have now, and that's a great place to start from. And it sounds like in terms of what's changed in Osterville over the last 10 years, nothing, what I'm hearing from you, at least from your perspective, nothing significant that would take you down that path of concern that other communities have gone through.
How much more change?
Yeah. Yeah.
All of the village wants to change. We like the way the schools are, right?
And that's perfect. I mean, those are the strengths that you want to see preserved in your village, the character of your village center. Great. Yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to see that document. We certainly have the village plan. But I'll be honest, I'm not sure if I have that work that went behind it. If I do, not at my fingertips.
Here, because I didn't know this at all, and I've been picking around trying to pay attention for 2 decades. Could you explain to these people what this mysterious CCC is? How many people employ, where they get their money, who supports them? Can you do that for us?
So wow, that's a big request. And again, we're not the Cape Cod Commission, we're the town of Barnstable. They're our regional planning agency that was established by a special act of the legislature, who adopted the Cape Cod Commission Act, and that was 1990. 90s. Yeah, I think that's, it started in the 80s, and it really started. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you today is that, you see this sort of threat of change coming from the commission, but the commission started as a reaction to really seeing too much change in Cape Cod. It started as an organization that was meant to regulate land use on a regional level, which is pretty unique. There are other regional planning bodies across this country, but very few of them have regulatory power. Very few of them have the ability to step in and take a house that's on the National Register and say, and have an ability to influence whether or not it should be demolished, or to take to look at a development that's over 10,000 square feet and say, does this meet our goals or not? So the Cape Cod Commission was really established as a regional body that was meant to balance growth, environmental protection, and economic development on Cape Cod. And I'm not a Cape Cod Commission expert. I couldn't tell you how many people sit on the commission itself. Barnstable has an appointed representative. All towns on Cape Cod have an appointed representative, and then there are and additional others. But yeah, one of their roles, and one of their big roles is certainly to support local towns in planning, and not just planning like the master planning that we're talking about today, but certainly thinking about issues that cross town boundaries. So we partner with them a lot when we look at resilience initiatives, because if we get a major hurricane in Cape Cod, that's not something that's going to respect town boundaries. So, they really stand out, I think, as a regional leader when it comes to these bigger issues on Cape Cod, and certainly supporting towns. And, Barnstable's lucky. We have a big planning department. We have resources to be able to put into local comprehensive plans, but not all towns do. So they're there to support those other communities in processes like this as well.
I'll just tell one other item. Things that have to be mandated because of their size that go to Cape Cod Commission, we're kind of hamstrung as a planning board member. I guarantee you, anything that is gray, I don't want anything going to Cape Cod Commission from a personal perspective, because I want us to make the decision.
But what I understand, I think, is that the framework of this LCP has to meet their guidelines. Is that correct?
Well, certainly
Why is it that we need, as a town, need to have their sign off and do it according to their definition of how this process works?
Yeah, we don't have to, but again,
why are we doing?
when we think about how again, how land use plans work, and, on sort of a bigger level, much like we don't just do a plan for Centerville and a plan for Hyannis, we think about the broader issues. We want to be a good regional partner when it comes to, thinking about broader issues like water quality, like coastal resiliency, like, housing. We obviously are host to the Regional Commercial Center on Cape Cod. There are plenty of land use and transportation issues that extend beyond our boundaries. So working with our regional planning agency and looking again for what are Barnstable's strengths, what is Barnstable carrying too much for the region on, those are important conversations to be having beyond our boundaries. So that's why we work from them. Of course, we hope we get to a place where we have a plan that balances future growth, environmental protection, and balanced economic development, much in the same way the Cape Cod Commission does. But that's the kind of consistency that we're looking for. Again, they don't approve our plan. We approve our plan. We send it to the Cape Cod Commission, and we hope in the end we've created something that's consistent with those core values in the Cape Cod Commission Act, which is really thinking about how we grow sustainably into the future, how we protect what makes Cape Cod a great place from the standpoint of the environment, and how we promote balanced economic development. So I would hope that those are all things that we want to see for our community and in our plan. The commission is there to think about, how these issues cross town boundaries. And there are some advantages to getting Cape Cod Commission approval. They give us some tools that we wouldn't have otherwise to be more effective in how we implement our local comprehensive plan, like our growth plan. Which is, the planning board plays a big role in. So having a certified local comprehensive plan gives us more ability to realize the goals and objectives in our own local plan.
But at the same time, if you submit a local plan that is completely inconsistent with their regional guidelines, suppose your plan says we want an 18-story apartment complex on the boat basin. All right. They'll kick that back to you. They'll say that's not consistent with our regional ideas about land use and access to the waterfront and so forth. They will kick it back to you, and they do have the power of the legislature behind them, correct?
The power of the legislator. So I guess I'll be honest. I don't know what would happen in the scenario where the town of Barnstable would say, we want to create something
hypothetical.
Hypothetical. Yeah, I imagine it would be flagged and that there would be conversations about that. But I also imagine that it probably wouldn't be all or nothing. If there were certain points, again, that they wanted to pull out, or that we as a community chose to.
So you could go against them. You could really say, well, sorry, you don't like our plan.
Ultimately, our plan couldn't get certified for consistency. Okay. Doesn't still mean it's not our plan. Right. We might want to come back and say, hey, this is something that,
what attaches to certification
as an issue. Sorry.
What advantages attached to certification?
Yeah, so advantages to certification are, again, I think we're being good regional partners in terms of thinking about the future of Cape Cod. It gives us certain access to funding and grants and priorities that we wouldn't otherwise. It gives us access to planning tools that we wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah, the Cape Cod Commission is a little bit unique and different, and under the sort of special act of the legislature that created them, they also created things, special planning tools. And again, it's not all about growth and change. A lot of it is about preservation. One of the tools that we have access to through the Cape Cod Commission is a process that they call districts of critical planning concern. And that was one of the things that we did in Centerville around issues that village raised about waterfront development and coastal resiliency. And that actually gives us the ability to limit development in vulnerable areas in Centerville that we wouldn't have access to. So again, it's about having the tools that, you know, might not be available to other Massachusetts communities, you know, because we've been recognized by the legislature as this incredibly unique and special place. We also have things that you can't do anywhere else in the state of Massachusetts, like override, you know, pre-existing non-conforming rights on pieces of property, or again, create a growth incentive zone where they say, hey, you have adequate public infrastructure and we're not gonna regulate here. So, I mean, there's sort of a toolbox, I guess, that you get access to that makes you more effective to carry out your plan.
At the end of the day, will the plan be developed to look like more of a townwide comprehensive plan? It's kind of like, not like Rick said earlier, but kind of townwide, mainly with little paragraphs about each village, or how does it look at the end of the day? Like you can't be specific to every village, every specific one. So how does it look in your vision down the road?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know. You know, I don't know what the organization of that final document looks like. And in a way, I think that's a good thing. You know, if we knew exactly what our plan was going to look like when we started, it means that, you know, we are not necessarily creating a process that's going to adapt to what we hear. You know, we're not going to use the strengths of our local comprehensive planning committee to say, hey, here's how you should tackle this challenge. So, you know, yeah, I think there's definitely a sort of a grand organizational challenge when we think about that. Like, how do we make statements for the whole town, but how do we, you know, do exactly what Rick talked about and make sure that all the voices of seven, you know, completely different villages come out in this process. You know, I'll be honest, we don't have that figured out yet, but you know, it's not just us. We have an incredible consultant team that we're working with that have done dozens of local comprehensive plans for places as complicated as Barnstable. So there are a lot of great examples. As Steve said, this isn't a process that's unique to us. It's a process that you know, is done throughout the country. And as we go through this, we'll develop that. We'll develop that out.
Mark, I will say that if you look at the last plan, it did include those specific village things. And I'll also say that all the committee members that we meet with regularly, every single one of them think they're on the committee, rightfully so, to represent their own villages and their own communities. And those are the people that when we talk, there's pretty robust conversation about, well, no, that doesn't apply to me or to the people that I, you know, think I represent. So I think that part of it clearly is going to come through in the end. And I think the output, depending on what it looks like, I guarantee is going to include the unique flavor of the village stuff.
One more question, that's probably on the website, but which meetings are public or at least can view? Like if someone wanted to watch a committee meeting? Those
yeah, they're all televised or come down in person if you like. And saved online you and watching.
Can I throw something out?
Please.
Yeah.
Off to it.
Thank you. What we're really here to do tonight is we're trying to figure out what you and the residents of all the villages in the town, what you want the town to look like in 2050 and in 2040 and in 2030. What's your vision of what you want? And part of the process that Kate's going to be bringing us through in the next hour or so is looking at things that you particularly like, which we've called the strengths. In each of the villages we've gone to, people have said what they really like about Barnstable Village or Centerville or wherever. And those are all going to be different, as we've been talking about for the last hour. And we want to get information from everyone as to what you want to have the town look like, so we can incorporate all of that information in the plan, which sets those broad guidelines out to look at a time frame 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. We had a lot of talk about zoning and what is in the zoning and what is not in the zoning. We shouldn't get wrapped around the axle on all this stuff. To the extent that someone thinks that Barnstable Village, that Osterville Village has no zoning. That's not true. Osterville Village is completely zoned. The zoning in Osterville Village is different than the zoning in Centerville and in Barnstable. Because the interests of the people in Osterville are different from the interests of the people in Centerville and in Barnstable. So our process is to go all over the town of Barnstable, to all of the villages, collect all the information about what you want the town to look like, so we can develop a long-range vision, village by village, under the umbrella of the whole town, and then figure out what tools at our disposal we can use to accomplish that mission. So in order to do that, we have to collect information from all of you through meetings like this and through the questionnaire, which is available to anyone who lives in a village, works in a village, drives through the village, has any connection whatsoever to the village. And the same with all the other villages within the town.
Just to be clear, my questions about zoning were specific to what Steve had said about the need to, we don't have a zoning plan like the rest of them. So the thought that maybe we are going to get changes in zoning of that statement is why I ask you those questions.
Sure, that's it.
I do know we have zoning here, and a lot of us would like to see the zoning remain the same here. In fact, most of us will. Okay, so I'm just responding to what Steve had said earlier. That's all. That's the only reason I brought that up.
Yeah. And I brought it up strictly as an observation more than anything else, because clearly the zoning is in place and there's nothing, remotely close to what is sort of allowable in Hyannis in terms of density and things of that nature. So I mean, that hasn't changed. It was just, I would say, more of an observation about thinking forwardly about those things that maybe are here now that we want to make sure don't change.
Yeah, so I think Bob did a great job of pivoting us to the SWOT in that sense. So I think his strength is our natural resources, really, right? It's a relationship between the land and the sea to a certain extent. That's including Joshua's Pond, which is an extraordinary asset for the village. It includes Douses and Nantucket Sound as like extraordinary spaces that are to have to be pretty clear, if not at the top of the type of things that sort of express our character, the things that we like to do for recreation. So I put that up near the top, and then there's something about our historic character, which is partially based off the relation to the sea. And then, if you look at a map there in the back corner, you can just see, as far as developable space or space that's waterfront property, I mean, the extraordinarily high percentage of it is right here in this one village. And that's an amazing strength, and it's a strength for the town of Barnstable, not just the strength for the
Until it
village.
gets wiped out by climate change.
Possibly, yeah, and we'll get to the threats.
I think, if I may, please. One of the things I think we were talking about zoning, I'm going to go back just a little bit. I think one of the things that we found on our association and talking to people when we were having the problem with Airbnbs was that we really did not want to see a proliferation of Airbnbs as businesses in our community. And I think that was very important to most of the people here in the village. Especially the ones that are run, not individuals renting their own homes to somebody. It's much more the businesses that come in, people that buy up the property and use it as a business in a residential zone has become problematic. So
We will put that in the threats category. What I heard was non-owner.
yes,
Corporate.
yes.
All right.
That's why we kept coming back to zoning was really that issue. I think.
Thank you. All right.
So we actually live in Centerville. We just moved here from Rhode Island, and I will tell you that the public access to those natural resources in Osterville, Centerville, Katuitt is fabulous in comparison to living on Narragansett Bay. So that is a huge strength, and I would never advocate for that to change.
Other things. Why do you love living in Osterville? Your favorite place to go? Your favorite thing? Neighborhoods. Great. What about your neighborhood do you love?
People,
Yeah, knowing people, yeah.
knowing people, we've just got great community. People standing up for one another, despite our differences.
Thank
It's by far the most walkable community in the town of Barnstable. Just go out and people come here and drive here from other villages just to walk.
Yes, they do.
We will add that as a potential challenge as well.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
I would say a big strength is all the churches we have in our village and our library. And they really come together as a community. I think we have 5 or 6 churches and obviously a very nice library.
I would add, I think the scale of our village is not just this one, but all of them here, or what brings people here, because they live in areas that are much more dense. They don't, this is like a throwback to many people. And this is what brings people to the Cape. They come here not only for the water, but for the way the community is set up, and it's not gotten overrun. A lot of the other people have said that about other places. I've lived in other places, and as wealthy, if not more wealthy than this area. And those communities have totally changed in the 50 years that I obviously lived there. So a lot of us don't want to see that happen.
So that classic small scale.
People get out of their own areas that are high density, so they can get away from that and have a little bit of relief. And a lot of people say when they come here in other villages, I want to find a way to live here.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
And that's what is important about zoning changes and everything else here, density.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will agree with that in this village, because they say, you know what, I've always heard this is a throwback. And there's nothing wrong with a throwback. People look at it nostalgically and what maybe they've lost in their own communities that are still here. So.
We were also very blessed with first responders. Admittedly, a lot of them are COM, but we're very fortunate to be in COM. And the Barnstable Police Department is phenomenal. The realize it's townwide, but we enjoy that. We enjoy that the town brings us the services from the water. And we have our own wells and COM.
Yes.
Peter is actually director.
We have some of the best water in the country. People come from Florida, come from the West Coast, they can't believe how good the water is. It's like growing up, you kind of think that, you know, for granted, but it's an unbelievable asset to have. And that definitely draws people in.
And there are sustainable issues around that as well, that we do not get a forecast. And as well on the groundwater geologists. Very much appreciate our fine aquifer and Peter's work and so forth. And there are many threats that Peter can tell us more than I can as a director, 1 or 3 directors in the water department.
Just lucky to have what we have. And we planned ahead way before I was there, but to get extra wells, to plan ahead for the future so that we wouldn't have a water problem. So that's a huge asset.
I'll just say it, we love the Dowses Beach area. We love the fact that there's a handicapped accessible fishing pier at Dowses Beach, a beautiful dune system. It functions as an unofficial wildlife refuge for at least 200 species of indigenous and migratory birds throughout the year. It functions as a place for people who live here and in adjacent villages especially, to go for one of the most peaceful and beautiful walks you can make in the town of Barnstable.
Yeah.
You're
I just
welcome.
want to add to that too. It's accessible all year round. And people are walking there all year round. People come and park when they're recovering from an operation. And so they can walk up and down the parking lot of Dowses Beach in the winter when it's not possible to do it on the roads. It happens all the time. It's a very special gift that we have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Strength, things you love.
I don't want to derail everyone's nice thoughts here, but I was just thinking. So back, I think it was Friday the 13th of March, COVID really hit. And one of the things we were thinking about as a board was, how to remain connected as a group while the whole world shut down. We were trying to decide, what to do with our lives. And it came up that we should start thinking about the next long-term planning report. And so I was emailed the 2 prior reports, and I actually had plenty of time on my hands like everybody else. So I read them, and they were both really well done and addressed all the issues that you are talking about right now. You've been here for an hour and a half, and we filled about 10 lines of your spreadsheet there. And I guess my question is like, why did we decide to do away with the village input in the form of our own plan that would be part of the town's plan? Because we have already established that we do have 7 unique communities. So I know that there are people in this room here who probably don't know what a QR code is. And I just think that that was a very, very effective and readable wealth of information. And even though the last one was 2005, believe it or not, as a village, we had already started to think about it. And who was going to work on it, who was going to do what, and what we were going to do. And to our surprise, we were told, well, we're not going to do those anymore. And I'm just curious, who made that decision and why? Because what we're trying to do, you guys could save yourselves a lot of evenings out by hopping around from village to village. If you gave us even 3 or 4 months to gather all of our own information as an OBA and package it all up and give it to you in conjunction with your QR codes and your surveys. But to me, those were very extensive, very well thought out, and very open-minded to the challenges of the future. And it just seems like that whole system was tossed aside, but nobody asked us, and nobody told us why. And now here we are. And, you said that we're going to go on for another hour and submit people's ideas, but all those ideas from all those folks here could be communicated directly to us. We could package them all up, hand them to you, and I'm sure, you might be rather home watching your own, with your kids or watching your favorite TV show instead of flopping around the villages of Barnstable every night. To me, it just seems more effective and easier to include that as part of the process. I'm not saying don't do surveys. I'm not saying don't do meetings. But why toss that aside? Because it worked well. And you have people sitting right at the table here who are already thinking about it and ready to work on it. So I just want to throw that out there because to me, it seems like you're kind of skipping part of, a well-established process that worked and was actually published as part of the town's long-term plan last time. And if you haven't read those, I mean, they're great. They're really well done and they touch all the bases and are addressing all the issues that everyone in the room here has mentioned. So, if we're already talking about a process that's going to take a year or 2 years before we're even ready to, present it to the town council, then why not give us just 3 months to kind of use this winter to, cultivate, get some input from everybody here in the room, put something together in email form so it's easily passed around, and just include that as part of your planning.
So first of all, I'd like to say, I really think this exercise is important to this process. So I do hope we can keep doing this because I want to hear everybody's voice. I'm not sure what you mean by sort of abandoning the idea of village outreach. I mean, that's exactly what we're here to do today. So
process and the surveys. but include that.
Yeah, and I mean, if the Osterville Village Association wants to bring input into this process, like, we're happy to have that. But I will also say, you know, as we started this process, things do change in 15 years. Things do change in 15 years. If you took that off the shelf, yeah, maybe something that we love about Osterville is the lack of change. And we want to highlight that going forward. But maybe we have new residents and new voices who want to be a part of this plan. And something that we've done in our participation plan that guides this is make sure that our processes in terms of how we go out and talk to people, all the comments and input that we get are published online for everybody to see. So it's an open process that we offer it equally to everybody in terms of access and participation in the process. So certainly if the OVA wants to organize voices and bring those to the table, like, we're not telling you not to do that, but something that we've committed to doing as a town that maybe, you know, there were not resources to do 15 years ago is to say that we'll come to you. And we'll sit at your table and we'll participate in that process as a partner with you, so that, again, you don't feel like as an OVA, you know, that's on you, but we want to collaborate with our people. You know, a big theme of our outreach here is, you know, we are taking our outreach out to the people. You know, we're literally standing on the street, talking to people, trying to hear their voices. And, you know, I think that's what's different than 15 years ago is maybe the approach was, you know, come to town hall and tell us what you think, where, you know, we've really approached this as a, we're going to come to you, we're going to come to the Village Civic Association, we're going to come to your whatever it is, and you know, start and listen to your voice in that way. So
just make the short answer to your question. Derail the discussion, but if you've been to the last several OVA meetings, we do have a lot of people attending our meetings.
Yeah. Well, a lot of issues.
The population of Osterville is quite good. I mean, it's tiny. So I think if you know, I mean, OVA, obviously, I'm here, it's important, not that that's not important to come here, but it's important. That's about awful. But it's important to be here because it's important. But but if you look around, I mean, it's a tiny fraction of the people in the village of Osterville are members of the OVA. And even when it was packed, the last meeting I was at about 2 months ago, and this room was packed, it's still, that was a tiny fraction of what, and I think what Elizabeth's trying to say is they're trying to get a broader reach, that's all.
The short answer to your issue that you just mentioned is, Steve tells me we have that report. So what I can tell you is that report is now part of our data. And I can tell you that at least Steve and I will reread that report and include it in amongst all the data we're collecting from all the places. And again, the purpose is not to exclude earlier information or exclude input from any organization. We're happy to get information. We reach out to the village associations in all of the villages because, like you, all of the villages have a wealth of information already on the shelf that doesn't have to be reinvented. So part of the process is to collect all those things that are already on the shelf and incorporate them in. The fact that it may be 15 years old is not terribly important, because as you point out, a lot of things that were applicable 15 years ago are the same today. So a lot of those are directly transferable. Some have changed, and we want to get that data. And I certainly would, I think Elizabeth would agree, over the next 3 months, if the Osterville Village Association wants to meet and put together and talk to your members and send us data about what you think is important, we would love to have it. And if you can convince the Barnstable Village Association and the Centerville Village and the West Barnstable Village to do the same, we'd love that even more. So it's not a question of excluding or ignoring. We're going everywhere we possibly can to get as much information as we can and include it there. And I'll tell you, I'll speak for Steve. I guarantee the two of us at least will read it. All right, and that's 2 out of 17 to begin with.
Well, thank you. I never used the word exclude.
I understand that, but I want to make sure that
I think
it's clear that
that
we're trying
could have come from you, and you could have already said to all the villages, why don't you put together a little report for us on what you'd like to see as part of our survey process.
Actually, you said the opposite, and the town manager said the opposite from the beginning. We are going to, Elizabeth said, zoom out from the villages. It's just a quote from you. Okay, they didn't want to hear from the villages to bring, to me, it's you want to control the work product versus the village control. We've done it before, we've done it in the past. You can shake your head, but that's just what I myself.
I'm shaking my head.
Yeah, I know you're shaking your head, but this is what was brought down to us from the very beginning. We're not gonna deal with the villages on a separate, what they want, we're going to make it from the top down. Okay.
I think that's presumptuous of you to think that you speak for the entire village. I
I'm
mean,
not
clearly
saying
your
I do.
membership is a percentage of village.
We have
members.
450
but-
members, and what happens is
And how much-
people in town, it's the people who come to meetings and participate. Okay, people who don't come to these meetings. You've been in public life long enough to know that the people who come to the meetings are people who are interested in participating. Other ones do not do so, okay, by their own choice. These are all public meetings, they're advertised, and always have been like that. So to say that the OVA represents only a small percentage, you're right. Okay, 450 out of 3,500, but those are the people who participate in the village. Okay, and these are open meetings. Okay, so dismissing the OVA in that respect, to me, sort of, it rubs me the wrong way. Okay, because everybody's allowed to come here.
John, what is it that you want to say that's not being collected or being listened to? That's
We
what
said
I'm
from
like.
the beginning.
What is it right now? We're
Next
here,
year.
we're here now.
What we're
We're
here,
talking
what
about
we're
this
saying
process.
is that we have done this process, villages have done this on their own in the past. And we're told, no, that's not gonna happen this way, this year. Okay, this survey, okay? Now you're saying, well, people, Mr. Twist is saying, people wanna go ahead and do that, then they can do that. You should have said right at the beginning, we wanna hear what the villages have to say and work from that direction forward instead of top down like you're doing. Okay,
I think the end result is the same.
I don't
Your
think it
your
is.
feedback
I
is
think it
being
depends on who
solicited as well as
controls,
every
who
single
controls
person
the
in
work
town.
product.
As every single person in the village.
And I've also gone on public websites a number of times, or other surveys, and many of the comments that people have made do not make those surveys. I know that for a fact. Okay, somebody is looking through them and not putting those certain comments in. So I know that is a fact. Okay, and we can prove it to you. So anyway, that's where we come from. That's what Bruce was saying. Okay, this is right. Mr. L said right away that this is not going to be a village process anymore. It's going to be a town process. Okay, and now you're coming to us and asking for that process, but we don't have control of the work process. You do.
You have as much input as you need, as much as you'd like. And to think that whatever your comments and whatever the village of Osterville puts forward isn't going to be included, I think is not accurate.
That's the second time I've heard not accurate in the last 2 meetings. Okay, and I have the information that proved that I was accurate. Okay, so
if there's something that you want to put forward, if you want to collectively put your own wish list or how you see this going forward, more than happy to include it, and it will be included to the extent that it balances the entire report. So, you know, your voice is not the only voice, you as the Osterville Village Association president.
Oh, of course. I'm not saying my voice is, we have membership here and we vote on things. Okay, it's a collective voice. It's not my voice.
I don't think it was ever about excluding village civic associations. I think when we said we wanted to think about broad issues that impact the whole town, you know, that's all we meant by that. I think what got read into it was this idea was that there was something exclusionary about that approach. And I think as it was very aptly said, we obviously want to be here. We do want to be here. And I'm happy to be here tonight instead of with my 3 kids to hear from you and hear what you love and go through this process with you, even when it's challenging, because it matters. It matters what the OVA has to say. I mean, you guys have this as your leadership for a reason, and you know more about your village and more about what your village cares about than we ever will. So, you know, that's why we're here to listen. But we also know that not everybody has the ability to participate in a process equally. There might be another mom with 3 kids who couldn't make it to this meeting tonight. And that's why we want to give them the opportunity to take the survey, or that's why we want to talk to them through their schools or their PTO. It's about, again, not just doing this, but doing this and giving other people who might not be here the ability to have a voice in this process.
Okay, just
I
let's be
know
clear.
you're trying to start
issues at all. I was just saying the more input you have from all of us, the better. You know, whether it's the 25 folks here tonight, or through a survey, or through some document that we share as we've done in the past. I think it'll make your report that much better.
And so I think we're saying the same thing there, honestly, because, you know, from the beginning, this was about trying to reach as many people, you know, in the ways that they're comfortable, communicating with others.
And I think I'm going to jump in because I'm really silent for the evening. So I'm kind of playing dual roles, not only on the OBA board, but also as a member of the LCPC. And I think that's the ultimate statement in bringing in the opinions of the OBA board, that's part of the process. That 3,664 people in our precinct, those are residents. And while I agree the OBA board, obviously, because I'm a member of the OBA board, I've been for a decade, is so important, so crucial to communication through our village. And clearly we have many issues that our village to remain in close communication with. But it just shows the openness, and of course, using those documents that are used. I read them. We all have copies in our materials from the board that we're on, and we go forward. And it's outreach like this that lets us engage with more people, and that's what it's all about. So that you all can feel free to share your opinions, whether it's with the notes we're taking tonight, or by contacting any one of us, or attending these monthly meetings that we do that are open to the public and that are on the website.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I think the procedural conversation is important, but I do feel like we're at probably 95 or 100 minutes so far and not really made a really large contribution to the original purpose of the evening. So I guess the point of order is whether or not we continue on a conversation about the sort of procedural machinations, or whether or not we try to accomplish some bit of feedback or invite the LCP back, or some, or another proposal from the floor. But, just being cognizant of people's time and the fact that I don't really think we've gotten around to the work product.
To that point, Paul, we do have other agenda items.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 big ones,
Right.
probably. Yeah. But I wouldn't want anybody who's here, Mr. Chair, who wanted to participate in this, to say that we were cutting it short either, right? That's been part of the problem, is the conversation about conversations, and then you don't have the actual conversation.
I feel that the committee that are here have spent an enormous amount of time explaining themselves without listening to us.
Oh, okay. I did not get that impression from this experience, but that's.
I make a suggestion.
Yeah.
I think there's a way we, OBA can be more productive relative to this. It was obviously been awkward for people. And I've been involved in long-term planning professionally for 30 years. We've been the CEO of my corporation. And it's a great idea, but it's intuitively, it doesn't work, okay? We tried, the OBA, I think, can help. And I think we should take this under advisement, that we take what you wanted to get, we can take how we can help, and see if our leaders won't say, why don't we do this, that, and the other thing in order to meet your direct needs? Okay, in other words, SWOT process. If we can reach out, like John told us so well, say, please send me your SWOT project, we'll get things back. Much more than what you unfortunately couldn't do, just because of the nature of things, right? That's the nature, don't feel bad. And so I suggest, Mr. President, that we table this, and we, as a board, we take up next meeting and see how we can be more helpful and how we can blend. So we do have input and impact. We want to have impact. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable.
But I think before we do that, if anyone has anything they want to add here, please.
Yes, thank you.
I don't want to say that I understood how this process might work.
Matt, go ahead.
Please. I think what the problem here is, and this is what I've seen since I've started this process, quite honestly, when I reached out to Elizabeth and Matthew Levesque, Town Council President, since beginning of 2021. I reached out, there was a lot of, coming out of COVID, we were in a situation where social media, people, and as much as we do have friends in our community and that we trust and we care about, and we saw that, but we also saw kind of a nastiness, right? And a distrust that was kind of created, not only in our community, but what's a way that we can create trust, reach out, get out into our community as a planning department, as a council, boards, committees, commissions, and get out there and make this happen. Because quite honestly, I didn't know. Our local comprehensive plan has been expired. We need to renew our, we need to do that. We need to get one ratified with the Cape Cod Commission so that we can move forward in these certain areas that have been explained, okay? So that's what started the process. Councilor Bogan was on the search committee for the consultant right here in Osterville. So he was part of that process of picking consultant. Was pretty adamant that we get the consultant with before having the committee. So in normal, you would actually have that in parallel, that you would commit to the consultant and try to get the board, but they wanted the consultant beforehand. So we did that, made the process longer, but we wanted to be transparent. Immediately, we've gotten demands from the OVA specifically that we authored it, we authored our village plan, and we want to be a part of this process, so on and so forth. You will absolutely be part of the process. However, you are not going to write the plan. That caused what you're kind of seeing now. And what I've seen tonight, from my point of view, is that you're seeing people justifying positions, trying to be right instead of getting it right. All the planning department here is to reach out to you and get your opinions about what our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are in this community. That's it. Not here to defend a position why the process is the way it is. It is the way it is. It doesn't ignore, we don't ignore the US Constitution because it was written in 1789, right? If there's things that need to change, it's a living, breathing document. So is our local comprehensive plan committee. I've read the Osterville 2010 report. It's fantastic. It's probably one of the best written parts of our local comprehensive plan from 2010, 100%. It should be considered. I've actually said that. It needs to be considered. However, this process is different now. We're working by guidelines with the Cape Cod Commission. That is not a threat. That is just a process that we're following. We are not going to ignore. I have people calling me saying, I understand that you're supporting 4 tenement houses in downtown Osterville. Where'd you get that from? I don't know where that came from. That has never been on my desk, never been on the planning department's desk. No idea where it comes from. Somehow that's a perceived threat. That's why they're here. So you can tell them, I don't want 4 tenement houses in my neighborhood. Can you please put that in the plan? Sure. You know what I mean? Let's have this conversation. It isn't about being right. It's about getting it right. That's why we're here. That's why I want to see this process go forward so that you can be heard. It's not an insult to what's done in the past. We're just trying to move forward and to do something that's better. And that doesn't mean anything was wrong with the past. It's just moving forward to try to get something collectively that we can be updated. That's all. It might not change much at all. I don't think it should. However, we need to open it, review it, and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you should give the time to quickly go through the next few things and just at least they took the time. Please respect their time and allow them to do the exercise that they are trying to do and reach out to you. But people have left because of the uncomfortable atmosphere. I've seen them shaking their heads walking out the door. That's unfortunate.
Well, that's your opinion, Matt.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
John,
You have this problem with trust. We have, there's been a number of years of untrustworthy actions by a number of people in this town. Okay, and that's why you don't have the trust.
We're trying.
I know you're trying.
Really, that's why they.
And to say that the OBA wants to write this thing is totally inaccurate. Okay, we would like to have the villages write their plans like they used to, not OBA.
Well, you
like
want to write the
everybody else.
plans, but I'm sure.
I think the village of Osterville writes their own plan. I think the other village, you asked them, you gave them the opportunity to say, instead of saying, no, you're not going to do it. We're taking this over.
It's not in the guidelines. That's all I'm saying.
What's the guidelines? So these the CCC guidelines?
Yeah.
Why do we have to go along with the CCC guidelines?
It has to be a town-wide thing, and it needs to be uniform. Quite honestly, John, I'm reading the 2010. Honestly, I'm not here to get whatever. I'm just here. I read the 2010.
let me put this out there. You are very organized. You did a fantastic job, as Bruce said, doing that. You know, some villages, they put like a shoebox out with some suggestions box. That was their way of.
I understand it. Well, why not go to them and say, we need a better plan from you, instead of saying, we're taking you out of it. We're coming from top down. Okay, that's our problem. This is not the first time this has come up, Matt. We came up from the very first, when you decided to do the LCP, you have to admit and said, Markel said, no, we're not having the villages do it anymore. You said we're gonna zoom out from the villages, and the rest of us are saying, wait a minute. How do you know better for our village than we do? I'm not saying just us.
I think
saying
there's
this whole
something
community.
lost in translation, Joe.
I think there is, Matt.
Yeah, there's definitely something lost in
I think there
translation.
is.
I think.
Remember that many people here are watching what the town council has done over the past.
And John, just.
You asked for, I'm sorry, I'm
No,
talking.
you stop pointing at people, it's very rude. You pointed
Okay,
at.
I'm not taking. I got
Exceptionally rude.
I got thick skin. Thank you.
I'm sorry. It's not.
Exceptionally rude.
I think we're having a reasonable discussion here, okay? And you talk about lack of trust, okay? You have to look at yourself in the mirror, okay?
John.
We can go over a bunch of records that we've had problems in the past, so we'll just leave it there. Yeah.
Now it's getting personal. Always gets personal, Joe.
No, it doesn't get personal.
It always gets.
Not personal. It's just what you're doing, Matt.
Can we just move on and?
We have to do the whole SWOT analysis. It's 9 o'clock. Can we have these folks back or?
Yes, we can have them.
I just think, we have so many agenda items that were published that won't be
We're gonna have to
addressed.
get to those tonight.
We're not gonna get to them?
We no longer have a forum with the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I guess the SWOT analysis goes on, right?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Let's get to W. What is it?
Lively debate, strength.
Thank you, Paul. All right, it sounds like the consensus of your chairperson is to wrap up tonight. I will say we've done this in multiple other village civic associations really successfully and created processes that have been created products that have been constructive. We'd love to come back if it's open. We'd love for you guys to do a process and to bring it forward to us. And certainly we'll reach out to John, to the rest of the board, we'll work with Jennifer. And yeah, we know that sometimes these processes can be contentious and difficult, but I think it's also important to know that we're committed to working with our village civic associations, hearing all voices, even when we don't agree, even when there are things lost in translation. So.
May I ask a question? Can this plan from 2010 that I've heard a lot about, can that be put on the net?
Yeah, Kate, it's already there. So we actually brought it with us tonight because we figured it would display prominently. So it's on, so yeah, we have the plan. This is the product. It sounds like there's additional work product that goes with it, the report. So we'll try to get this, but this is on the Barnstable LCP. So barnstablelcp.com. It's on that website under our document library. First thing we put up on those websites is start with what we have today. Again, this is an update, not a creating something new from whole cloth.
May I ask what I hope is a short follow-up?
Sure.
What happened to that plan? It was done in 2010. Was it put on the shelf and nobody looked at it, or did people work through that plan over the next, 12 years?
12 years, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what happened to the plan? I've been on lots of committees in lots of law firms, and you always have plans, and you always leave the meeting with a great plan, and nothing happens to it. I'm kind of curious what happened to this plan. And I'm not being critical of anything. I just want to know. And I take you at your word. You take a plan, you will look at that plan. You'll presumably do a draft of that plan and your new plan. The OVA will get it and say, okay, well, we think you ought to add back in this, this, and this. I know you will in good faith consider that. And hopefully back and forth it will work out. But I'm just curious what happened to the plan. I know it's now 15 years ago, but I want to know
if it was just a lot of work for no reason, which so many committees do.
I can partly answer that, and maybe it's, because I've been sitting here and I've enjoyed those 15 years, and OVA and OBPA has been treated the way we asked to be treated, okay? And therefore, that's good. There's not an awful lot that I can think of that we were treated poorly, right? And that's what we basically asked for. We like this, we like this, like this. We don't want that to happen. We don't want that. That didn't happen, and that didn't happen. And everything that we like, it did happen. So it has been answered. And I'm happy here. I'm very critical. I'm very much involved in 7 organizations, and I love what's going on.
And you made the comment I like the most. You want it the way it was in 2010. I want it that way too.
And we're very, very fortunate. I mean, we're blessed. Right? And it's hard to be blessed with the whole world changing around us. And it's hard to stay that way. What really troubles us, more senior people, is when, like, I paid attention to CCC's August 1 thing. I sat there for 3 days to listen to it. And there's so much that is inferred, like bicycles are totally honored, right? Like multi-stories in multi-honored. And then we hear that, and again, we just hear these things, that single family lots are questioned, right? And so we have these things, and we're good people, we want things to be, and we've been very well treated the last 10 years. And that's why we like to be dynamic in the plan, so we can stay this way. Unfortunately, it's that word equity that's kind of scares us, and I don't want to go further. And I hope you understand equity. And I don't want to describe it, but that's what current incident is very much. And it's, I've said enough. Thank you.
Okay, we want to postpone this to, or continue it another time? Can we?
I deferred to you, John. This is certainly your meeting, but what I can say is that I think we're happy to come back in whatever form or iteration that you would like to go through this exercise, or structure it different to look back at that 2010 plan and answer some of those questions. What's changed, what we don't want to change. So we'd be happy to dialogue with you after this. And
why don't we make another shot at a different meeting?
Great.
We're gonna advertise it.
Yeah, and we can think a little bit ahead. I heard maybe if we had a little bit more understanding of what the structure of this meeting looks like, we could come more prepared. So, we'd be happy to work with you on sort of setting up exactly what that agenda might.
Could I just say I've worked in a lot of SWOT analyses, and I'm not sure this was the best way to do it because we only got through S.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to, say that I'd love to have you back to continue the exercise. But we'll all have time to be thoughtful and think about what we want to say with respect to weakness, opportunity, and threats. Does that make sense to you?
That's absolutely right. And,
Okay.
We'd love feedback. Hey, if it makes sense to, break down into 4 small groups and rotate around, like there are plenty of ways to facilitate this that might be more constructive and allow people to answer process questions in a different space.
Could you send us a copy of that so we can think about it before the next meeting?
A copy of the plan.
No, what
The 2010.
what you were going to, your SWOT.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Honestly, it wasn't as simple as that. We feel like maybe sometimes in the other forums, the unstructured approach has worked, just strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But we could lay out a framework, I guess, for that conversation, and more about what we mean in each one of those categories. Yeah.
I hate to bring this up, but before you leave, so that I really have a full understanding of, and I think this is a good plan. I think we need to go forward and give our feedback for what we want in the village. But what I'm still not quite getting is kind of similar to what Mark said. It seems like we have to put together a plan for the town as a whole. You want the input from the different villages, but the plan has to be overall for the entire town. So if you're looking at comments from everybody in the town versus like the village, I guess I'm still not figuring out how you're gonna put this together, because obviously there's more people in Hyannis. Their needs are going to be totally different than our needs, and yet the plan has to be for the plan. So I guess what I'm saying is it might come up that if you look at numbers, because you talked about data, the data, it's gonna be data driven, it's gonna be important. So if you look at numbers and you've got more people saying, we need more housing, we need more density of housing. And yet in the village of Osterville, the majority of people are saying that we don't want density, okay? So I'm still trying to, in my head, figure out, is it really worth us? I mean, obviously it is. So I won't even go there, because it is. I think we need to give our feedback. But I don't really still fully understand how you're gonna put together a plan that encompasses the entire town, that says the town of Barnstable wants to go ahead and you know, build 3-story homes in places, or however you're gonna do this. And yet in our village, it's going to be totally opposite. And so how is the overall plan going to even take that into consideration?
So it's probably, so it'll be different depending on the issue area, but I'll just use housing as an example. So when we say we want to zoom out and we want to think about the whole town, I mean, the town is its 7 villages, you know, that's what we are. So, you know, those two things, I mean, we think about townwide issues and we think about village issues, and it's really hard to separate those out. But, you know, I mean, housing is a great one. We say, you know, we need to increase our supply of housing in the town of Barnstable. And then, you know, you look at that. So John brought up the issue of the different village centers. And, you know, I brought up the example of underutilized property in Hyannis. So that's one of the goals that we have in Hyannis, is how do you redevelop underutilized property? Well, that's a great way to add housing. You know, look at properties that are underperforming or underutilized. How can we bring those back, make them contribute more to the community? And that meets our housing goal as well. You know, maybe that goal looks a lot different in Osterville. You know, maybe it says, hey, you know, we don't want any more growth or change in our village. And, you know, but there are other ways to approach that. I mean, we adopted an accessory dwelling unit ordinance, for example, that was meant to, you know, use existing houses, existing structures to provide another form of housing, but also to respect the character of neighborhoods and villages, year-round housing, you know, as opposed to short-term rentals. So there are different solutions to every problem. You know, just to say we have a housing problem, whatever those actions might be very different in Hyannis than they are in Osterville. So yeah, maybe collectively as a town, we say one of the challenges we want to address is housing. And then maybe this plan looks at, hey, how are we going to address that challenge differently in different villages?
The short answer to your question is, part of the plan is organized around villages. So the goals and objectives and problems are different from village to village.
Okay.
But whatever the goals and objectives are of each village are outlined under the umbrella of that particular village. So we have 7 villages, we have 7 geographic sections.
That's the part I wasn't getting.
Yeah, and it's all.
So
it's all
it will actually.
Of the town of Barnstable.
But it will identify the villages that.
Exactly, the goals and objectives of Barnstable will be different
Okay,
than the goals and objectives of other villages.
okay.
And the overall goals and objectives of the town are a compilation of all the goals and objectives of all the villages. And how do we accomplish the goals and objectives of each village in the context of the entire town?
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We'll give me a call. We'll work on another date for this.
Absolutely. That sounds good.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much.